Good evening, and welcome to the 15th Annual Sconset History Night. Our topic this evening is 125 Years, History of the Siasconset Casino. But before we hit our first serve, or open the curtain on tonight's show, I'd like to offer thanks and introductions. First, big thanks to the casino and its staff for hosting this evening yet again. How marvelous and fitting that we can dedicate this program to casino history and deliver it in the fantastic space itself, which has been at the heart of our village for 125 years. Thank you, Dave Dunn, over here on the left. And thanks to all your staff for the multifaceted help in making this evening possible. Thanks to our sponsors, the Nantucket Historical Association and its Executive Director, Niles Parker, for funding the recording of this talk and then making it available on the NHA website, as has been the case with our past talks. We also thank the NHA Research Library for use of their archival images. We thank Karen Crooks and Chris Kinsley Hancock for their important images, and we thank Sheila Lathrop for the sheet music that is used in the ad and the flyers. And thanks to NCTV and Frank, who is back there recording this presentation. The Nantucket Preservation Trust not only helps advertise this evening, but its executive director, Mary Bergman, will be one of our presenters. Finally, we thank the Sconset Trust for making Sconseters aware of this talk each year. My name is Hannah Judy, and I have taken on Sconset History Night with my chief co-conspirator, Rob Benchley, photo editor, without whose slides, knowledge, advice, and hard work, none of these talks would happen. Thank you, Rob. At last year's talk, I called for reinforcements. The world-famous Frank Anton was the first to step up to the plate and offer help. Frank suggested approaching this enormous topic through the use of story streams. And indeed, Frank kindly offered to cover tennis. Moreover, Frank and his wife, Georgine, also generously offered to supply the wonderful snacks, and I got the drinks with the help of my son, Jamie. Pete Sendelbach will cover entertainment at the casino for us. Pete is a year-rounder, a carpenter, a well-known actor, and we appreciate his willingness to dig into this rich history. Kate Heller O'Reilly will be telling the story of social activities at the casino, a wonderful homage to her lineage, as her mother, Mary Wheeler Heller, wrote a casino album, the 75th anniversary history of the casino, from which we have all drawn quite heavily, quite often verbatim. And thank heavens for Mary Heller's book, as the digital archives of the Enquirer and Mirror went black, just as speakers were ready to use them. Mary Bergman will address the architectural history of the building and the evolution of the physical plant. I will kick off this evening's talk with the story of the casino's founding and then end the talk with the story of the casino's relationship to all Sconseters, as well as some history of the casino management. Thank you so much to all the speakers who kindly agreed to give their time and effort to make this evening happen. My father, Paul Judy, started the Siasconset Historical Research Group and founded Sconset History Night. His knowledge of and devotion to Sconset history was deep and strong, indeed legendary. He died in February of this year, and we interred his ashes in the Chapel Columbarium on Saturday. Many members of our Judy family are here this evening, and I would like to dedicate this 15th annual Sconset History Night to the memory of Paul Judy. Thanks. Thanks very much. So let's get started. By the time the casino was founded in 1899, Sconset had over 100 houses, 2 hotels, and a summer population of about 2,000. Despite substantial journeys, large families came from the Midwest and Northeast. Those who came by way of New York took the overnight boat to Fall River, and not 1, but 2 trains to New Bedford. Then it was the steamer across the Sound, and finally the Nantucket Central Railroad across the moors to our village. From the outset, there were doctors, lawyers, teachers, and retired military men whose lives afforded the time to take such a long trip for a summer sojourn. It was soon evident that the village lacked a suitable gathering place for social, sporting, and dramatic events. Indeed, prior to the founding of the casino, the only room for a gathering of any size in Sconset was the railroad station, which was located just north of where the summer house pool is now. In the 1890s, that was the site of parties, complete with borrowed pianos carried down bank, violin played by the station master, and Japanese lanterns strung for decor. In 1892, a fund was started for the purpose of erecting a casino building. Let's turn for a moment to the word casino. No doubt we have all shared the experience of visitors exclaiming about the existence of a casino here in our little quiet village. Visions of blackjack tables, slot machines. But no, Merriam-Webster defines casino in its broadest sense as a building or room used for social amusements. The origin of the word is Italian, casa, and there it means summer house, country villa, or social club. Almost $800 was collected, and Mrs. Emily P. Rice of Detroit agreed to donate a lot on New Street that William Chittenden, Albert D. Davis, and Thomas W. King, trustees, and such other persons as may hereafter be associated with them, shall erect and maintain a building on said property to be used as a hall of amusement and for no other purpose by the summer visitors at Siasconset. It took another 7 years, 1899, for Mr. Chittenden, T.F. Galvin, and Mr. and Mrs. R.H. Fife to provide leadership to form a stock company to be called the Siasconset Casino Association. The Inky reported at that point that there was much interest in the matter and success seemed assured. In fact, in August 1899, the paper reported that 825 happy mortals attended a dance at the station, i.e. the railroad station, to benefit the casino, and blandly noted that it was too crowded. The following week, the agreement of the association was adopted to build, lease, acquire, maintain, manage, and conduct a casino, hall, building, or other institution for social, athletic, and other entertainment or amusement purposes. This was signed by 7 men and 1 woman, Jenny S. Jerome, a member of the Actors Colony. Mr. Chittenden, whose great-grandson, Rich Newman, lives year-round on island, and I believe is in the back of the hall. There he is. So Mr. Chittenden was elected president along with other officers, and it was decided to capitalize the association at $3,000, selling 300 shares at $10 each. 200 shares were sold in no time. There was another successful benefit dance that featured cakewalks, at which it was said that Charles Abbott and Miss Agnes Everett took the bun. A benefit concert at the chapel presented an opera singer, violinist, pianist, and recitations, and netted $130. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that the casino was considered a go. So now let's turn to our first story stream, the story of the building and evolution of the physical plant itself. Please welcome Mary Bergman, Executive Director of the Nantucket Preservation Trust.
Thank you. Former Tom Nevers resident. Sconset Heights, but I'm good, thank you. I just want to make sure. Okay, there we go. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hannah, and all for coming out tonight. That's me. Yeah, next. Next. Thank you to our own Vanna White, Rob there in the back. All right, well, here is New Street where we are today, back in 1890. Pretty rural. You know, we're looking towards the chapel. You heard from Hannah about the activities that went on, people partying in a railroad station because they had nowhere else to dance. I do think we should bring dances back. That's my thought after, yeah. After all of this casino history. Rob, can we see the next slide, please? Found this morning. Back in September of 1899, architect John B. Collins was asked to furnish designs and erect a building 69 feet by 107 feet with an audience room, with a floor to be laid with special reference to dancing, a stage, anterooms, dressing, reading, and smoking rooms. Ground was broken for the new building, and by October, the sills were laid and the piers were in place. This is the building inspector permit for when this opened up, and you can see, to be used for dance hall. All right, Rob, next slide, please. I hope you can see that. The simple barn-like design of the building, complete with cupolas and the open front porch, was in keeping with the relatively rural surroundings of Sconset in the 1890s. The original casino building was relatively simple, maybe simpler than some other casinos, but still as refined and elegant in design. When the building was finished, 2 tennis courts were completed in time for an informal opening in mid-July 1900, and nearly 200 people attended. The room was lit by lamps and house lanterns, with several ladies taking turns at the piano. Next slide, please. The 2 courts that were laid out when the casino was built in 1900 and placed where courts 2 and 3 are now, and a 3rd court, which is now court 1, was added in time for the 1903 season. Tennis was gaining in popularity at such a rate that fall the association bought 2 more lots from the Rice estate and Mrs. E.M. Rickerson to provide room for future courts. 3 more lots were built in 1909 in response to the players' constant complaints about congestion on the courts. And you will hear more about tennis towards the end of the evening. Next slide, please. The use for I love that we can hear the tennis balls too. It's like very, very rhythmic. And I did ask a friend beforehand, will they ever let anybody play I don't play pickleball, I don't know. No, there will never be pickleball here, so. I didn't know there was a difference in the sound because I never hear the tennis balls. It's a beautiful sound. Anyway, speaking of tennis courts, the use of the clay for the courts caused a problem when it rained because sometimes they didn't dry out for days. There was an experiment undertaken back in 1912 to improve the courts. Some of the casino fathers had watched the use of emulsifying road oil when they were resurfacing, when the town, the DPW back then, was resurfacing Center Street, and they thought maybe that would work on the courts. So the experiment did work. It was thought to be a great success since the courts were ready for play immediately after it rained, but that experiment was not ever repeated, probably good for the health of the players at the time. In addition, there were 3 new courts built. And in addition to the 3 new courts, a new building with 2 bowling alleys was built in 1909. Pool and billiard tables were added into the bowling alley. And in 1916, the building was moved to the western border of the property. Next slide, please. So here I can show you a little bit. This is the chapel, right over there. And then this is the bowling alley. So it's kind of where... Well, let me look at my notes. I'll tell you, yeah, okay. Court 9, yeah. This one here. This was later moved across the street where the shell lot is now, approximately there, where the coffins it was used by a garage by the coffins. And then building 4, back of the bowling alley, that was moved up to Sankaty Road. And we'll see the next slide, more bowling alley. There's another shot of the bowling alley right here. In 1918, the bowling alley and the pool tables were open to the public in an effort to increase the cash flow to the casino. And in 1920, the building was sold to Peace and Heirs for $600 and was moved across the street where it was behind a gas station and was used as a garage for the coffin's construction equipment. So we'll see another view of the bowling alley in the next, right, yeah, there we go, right here. I don't know, I think you would have probably heard the pins resetting while you were out playing tennis. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The casino was originally lit by kerosene lamps, and later an acetylene gas or carbide plant was installed and replaced replaced by a gasoline vapor system that produced gas when water was poured over lumps of carbide. Somehow the building had not burned down by the winter of 1913 and 1914, and so the board then voted to spend not more than $2,500 to wire it for electricity. 4 Delco generators and storage batteries were installed in a building that stands over in the shell lot now. Electricity did not come out to Sconset until 1925, and after that time, the generators were disconnected. So that gives you an idea of the great lengths people went to be able to see. We take this electric light for granted. In 1908 and 1909, there was a kitchen with all the fixtures, including an acetylene gas stove, the first on Nantucket, that was built over on the west side of the building by Arthur C. Folger II. It was remodeled in 1918 when a sun porch was built adjoining it. Next slide, please. In 1912, the association bought all the Roberts property and extended its grounds all the way west to Chapel Street. That same year, plans were drawn up for the 2-story porch to be extended across the south of the building with lockers, toilets, and storage space for stage accessories on the ground floor. I loved this note in the casino history, that there were no more major additions to the casino for over a decade, except for the stage curtain, which had to be replaced from time to time because it was so heavily used in those days. Also interesting to note that back in 1912, the Pacific National Bank was open for 2 hours a day here at the casino. Now, remember, in 1912, you could not have your automobile on Nantucket. It'd be another 6 more years until that ban was lifted, so you would have had to take the train or your horse in to go to the bank. Next slide, please. In 1923, this building was 25 years old, and it was already badly in need of repairs. And Mr. and Mrs. David Gray, who did so much for Nantucket and Sconset in particular, paid for those repairs. Some of the repairs included the erection of the buttresses to shore up the building walls, to properly surface and finish the new courts, and to decorate and improve the assembly room, and to improve the vestibule and entrances, the porch and doors and the windows. They hired, next slide please, Mr. Frederick Hill. Frederick P. Hill, who was a husband of the landscape architect Florence Miriam Hill, was an architect with McKim, Mead, and White in New York. And McKim, Mead, and White had been commissioned in the late 1970s to build the Newport Casino, which was the center of Newport's social life during the Gilded Age. Architectural critics have said that only Frank Lloyd Wright was more important to the identity and character of modern architecture than this firm. Next slide, please. Hill designed the decorative lattice work on the inside of the hall, drawing inspiration from the Newport Casino. So all these pictures behind me are scenes from the casino. They lifted some of those designs, I think, or were inspired by them when they transformed this space, which really improved the acoustics. And you'll hear later, they seem to provide a lot of activity for fun. I'm interested if you hear those stories. Anyways. James Holmes was the contractor, and the Grays were paying for the repairs. They'd assumed that it would be somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000. But as anybody who's ever done any renovation or any work on Nantucket knows, that number soon doubled. And when Mr. Gray wrote his check for $32,500, he also included a note to the then president of the casino saying that he hoped he was sending his last check. Next slide, please. Another major alteration was triggered by the need for a movie projector room, when the association bought a sound projector back in 1931. Frederick Hill drew up those plans, and Albert Egan and Ernest Coffin were engaged to do the work. The front porch was enclosed, and offices and ladies' rooms were added on the ground floor, and the movie projection room was created upstairs, which we are benefiting from today. Now, when I got to the trail started running cold, as Hannah mentioned, that the newspaper archives went down back in June, and she said, well, call Dave. He'll know what happened here at the casino, from the 80s on. And I called Dave, and he said, well, I'm only 35. I'm just a little bit older than that. So I needed to find someone older than Dave and I to come up and tell us. And he's going to come up and tell you a little bit now. A special guest.
Thank you. I happened to be an old guy walking by the street. As you go back to the last slide, if you could. Well, that was the way it was back when I first came to Sconset back in 1973. And in 1987 through 89, the board decided that they were going to change and try to, we didn't know it at the time, to restore the casino. And if you look at the picture of the casino in the invitation to this meeting, you'll see it was an open porch. So back then, the pro shop existed where the porch exists, and it was all closed in, and then all the equipment was down below. And at that time, there was a fellow named Gwen Thorson, who, if you drive around, you'll see houses with white chimneys on them, and most of those were designed by Gwen. So the board undertook a process. Oh, the other thing was the windows in front were all opaque. You couldn't see. So anybody who wanted to go see a movie, you had to pay to get in because you couldn't see through the windows. The pro shop was up above, and you had to walk up the steps to get to the pro shop. So we undertook to open up the porch, found some stairs that were buried in a closet, which are now, and the only way which are now the stairs going up to the upper deck of the porch. The pro shop was in there. We moved the pro shop to the front, put in clear glass so that anybody could watch a movie, and redid the floors and put the logo on the floor that exists there now. And that all took place. And then the other thing was we embarked on a controversial program of acquiring the land across the street. And people said, geez, you'll never need that land. Can't imagine we'll ever need that land. And we so we increased the dues, increased the initiation fee, increased the membership. The membership had actually been frozen for a number of years. And then we had a vote of the membership. Excuse me. I must have said something wrong.
This is the part where I remind you to turn off your phone.
So we embarked to do that. It was a controversial deal, And in fact, there was a number of people who voted against it, and we were trying to figure out how do you have an assessment where you have a number of people that were voting against it. But by raising the initiation fee, raising the dues, we had enough money to do it, and we didn't need the vote. And so we bought the gas station, where the property across the street where the gas station was. The people the families that owned the Chanticleer at the time owned the rest of the land where the tennis courts are, and they gave the land to the casino if we would make a donation for the same price that we would have bought the land for to the Nantucket College Hospital. So they didn't have to pay taxes on the cost of the land, and one of the families was a doctor. So that's how the casino looks today. And there was a fellow named Bill Roberts. There was a comment about the Roberts land, no relationship. And after we did all this, he was looking through his mother's photographs and found that unknowingly, we had restored it back before this was ever done. So just by finding various things buried in walls and in closets that gave us the clue to do what it looked like today. Thank you very much.
And just briefly to say that, as you're leaving today, if you walk across or walk by, you'll see 11, 13, and 15 New Street across the street where the casino built staff housing at 15. And I think that was, a real foresight. That took a lot of foresight, as you just heard. Are we ever going to use this land? Well, yes. And I think it's great that the casino is able to house staff and made those decisions. So maybe it took a lot of thought at the time, but it seemed like certainly the right one now. And last slide, there we are now. Here we are, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary. In 1901, the first full season of casino operation, Beach House, which was to dominate Ocean Avenue for the next 56 years, opened, thus bringing the number of Sconset hotels to 3. Everyone in the village was urged to use the casino, which was described in minutes of the casino board as a community center for social, athletic, and other entertainment or amusement purposes for all. I do think it's important for current-day Sconseters to understand that that was the original intent and purpose of the casino. In 1901, the casino was open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., except on nights when entertainments were held, and never open after midnight on Saturdays. Single subscriptions, as memberships were called, were $3 per season or $6 for a family of 3 or more. Guests staying at the hotels were actively sought as subscribers during their stays. One thing that particularly struck me as I read Mary Heller's history was how financially tenuous the casino was for the first 25 years of its existence. We will next turn to the entertainment and social streams of casino history, as those hall of amusement entertainments, community center activities essentially served as fundraisers to keep the casino afloat for more than 2 decades. Pete, you're on.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to share a memory just from last month. I don't have that much experience out here, but this year we prepared for the On the Isle show, Threepenny Opera, at the VFW Hall, which is a sort of amusement hall, as the casino was originally meant to be. It is large, well-lit, air-conditioned, plenty of parking, and we were really glad to have it. But the VFW Hall is not magical, and when we came to the casino, it was heaven to be in this venerable wooden tent with the doors and windows open, breezes blowing through, the sound of tennis matches coming in, and the sound of piano and song flowing out. And people loitered at the door and would come in for a minute to see what was happening. It really is a porous temple of story, song, and dance, full of laughter and fellowship, and thank goodness it has avoided air conditioning. But back to 1899, when the most prominent and visible strangers in Sconset were the theater people. The lack of air conditioning in theaters shut Broadway down for the summer, so cool ocean breezes were very welcome. Moreover, for those whose profession kept them in the public eye, the anonymity and informality of Sconset was welcome as a place to, quote, recover lost energies and build up for the winter's campaign. Maybe how we all feel to this day, in fact. The actors, musicians, writers, and artists of all kinds packed into the Ocean View House, filled the bunks of the Underhill cottages, and joined each other around the table in the dining room at Rudder Grange. Indeed, over the next 20 years, the Actors' Colony contributed mightily to the casino and Sconset, both culturally and financially. They were busy bohemians. The first production in the new casino took place on August 4th, 1900, and it was a smash, drawing an audience of 820 and earning $600, perhaps the equivalent of $22,000 today, for the benefit of the casino. So began the tradition of an August big show to support the casino, which has continued in many forms: theater productions, masquerades, fairs, dances, and sometimes everything all together. The casino's initial debt was paid off in 4 years, thanks to the productions of the Actors' Colony, and after that, the chapel and the new golf course west of town also benefited. In 1907, a show raised funds to purchase a gasoline-powered automatic mower for the 5-year-old Sconset golf course, which still can be seen in the bushes at the start of the 8th hole. The productions were often an inclusive, all-hands affair with popular music and plays rewritten with humor and plenty of local color. Actors would also perform scenes from their popular Broadway shows. And there were plenty of original creations. Roy and Kenneth Webb, who were to become Sconset's Gilbert and Sullivan, wrote, produced, and acted in their first show at the casino in 1908, when they were visiting their actor uncle, Digby Bell. Roy was 20 years old and Ken was 16. The show was a review of current Broadway hits. It was called The Merry Waltz Kiss. And the cast of characters included Susie Sankety, Winnie Wawinett, Queenie Quidnett, Sam Surfside, and other alliterative characters. Roy, who wrote the music, later became well known in Hollywood for his movie music, scoring films at RKO into the 1950s. Kenneth, the lyricist, grew up to become a successful director and writer of films. They are best remembered, however, as the authors and producers of the Sconset Follies series in the 19-teens. Among all the actors, though, Frank Gilmore was the one whose services to the casino were most outstanding. He was its president, board member, and manager at different times, and worked tirelessly for its improvement. A man of many talents, Mr. Gilmore was interested in wildflowers, trees, and birds. He loved children, was a tennis enthusiast, and seemed to charm all who knew him. It was he who, in 1907, planted the hedge and 25 elm and maple trees around the grounds. And it was he who led the first actors' strike in 1919 that resulted in the formation of the Actors' Equity Association. In addition to the adults' productions, there were children's shows in 1904 and 1905. Queen Nasturtium and A Day in Fairyland were written by 10-year-old Margaret Gilbert Fawcett, who lived at Rosemary on Main Street. She cast herself as the Queen, naturally. 400 people attended each play, and the second earned $40 for the Hospital for Crippled Children in New York. Margaret Fawcett, little Queen Nasturtium, would grow up to marry playwright Robert Wilson and found the Straight Wharf Theater in 1939. They wrote and produced plays, many with Nantucket themes and stories. The Fawcett Players eventually grew into the early theater workshop of Nantucket, led by Mac Dixon. The last big show was Carter's Casino Capers in 1917, which also saw the end of the railroad and the U.S. entry into World War I. That was the start of the end of the actors' colony. Air conditioning came to 42nd Street in the mid-20s, making it possible to work through the summer, and with the advent of movies, Hollywood began calling actors west to California. Movies were introduced at the casino on the 14th of August, 1915. The era of the silent movies featured Herbie Brownell, the blind pianist who played the accompaniment to the films, and Julian Penrose, who told him what was going on the screen, so he would know whether to play the William Tell Overture, Hearts and Flowers, or spooky music. Mary Heller writes, "The most significant innovation ever introduced at the casino was the movies. For 16 years, the tightly knit community had planned and participated in a kaleidoscope of creative, social, and intellectual activities together. There was no other form of entertainment in the remote little village, and the Sconseters had the ingenuity and the talent to amass their own. The introduction of the movies signaled the beginning of a gradual change in the character and personality of the casino." In addition to the cultural changes, the movies brought another peril to the casino. Early film was made of nitrate-based celluloid, which burned hotter than gasoline and was inextinguishable because it created its own oxygen when it burned. The early projectors were lit by an arc lamp, which burned hotter than 6,000 degrees. The second floor door to nowhere on the front of the building was an emergency escape for the projectionist in case of a possible inferno. Thank goodness that never happened. Many of the movies shown at the casino featured local actors who would say a few words afterwards. In 1917, Vincent Serrano, a stalwart Actors Colony member and veteran of hundreds of Broadway performances, stole the show, as reported in the I&M. The casino has been advertising its moving pictures by means of printed cards slung across a donkey, ridden by Francis Holgate. On the night when Vincent Serrano's picture was shown, he rode into the building on the above-mentioned beast of burden, down the center aisle, to the stage, and made the customary speech on donkey back. In 1920, amid great excitement, a movie called The Sinners was actually filmed here on the casino grounds. An elaborate set was built on what is now Court 8, and a cast of stars assembled, including Alice Brady and James Crane, who were on their honeymoon, and Miss Agnes Everett and Crawford Kent. Kenneth Webb, now 31 years old, directed the film. No copies remain, probably due to the volatility of the early film stock. The traditional August vaudeville shows continued to be an important part of casino life in the 20s and 30s. One of the greatest of them all was the 1923 review when Robert Benchley's two skits, If Men Played Cards as Women Do and The Treasurer's Report, were performed by the author with Mark Connolly, Donald Ogden Stewart, and Frank Jefferson. On another occasion, which sounds hilarious to me, Mr. Benchley was asked to play the piano accompaniment for a show, presumably because there was no one else to do it. Since the only piece he knew was Blue Moon, he played it over and over and over until the end of the play. Tony Sarg took the stage as an able comedian and also drew impromptu, humorous sketches of people at the casino. And I've been asked to plug the marvelous exhibition down at the Mailing Museum, Tony Sarg, Genius at Play. It's really phenomenal. So make sure you see that. The first sound pictures were shown on June 17th, 1931, and the members proudly agreed that the acoustics in the hall were excellent. One of the first movies to be shown was Tom Sawyer with Jackie Coogan. A new digital projector arrived in 2012, but the seats have apparently been a complaint for the last 90 years, as early accounts also describe patrons bringing their own cushions from home. The casino enjoyed children's shows created by Sandy Whitehead and produced by Linda McKay through the 80s and 90s. They are fondly recalled by moms and kids alike, and I heard that kids as young as 2 participated. The shows included Sconset Nomantics, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Where the Light Shines, James and the Giant Peach, The Light Still Shines, and others. Sandy and Suzanne DeHart wrote the scripts, and Gary Trainor composed music for most of the shows, which was played by a small ensemble. The last children's play was Mystery of the Lighthouse in 2008, written by Weedy Block and Suzanne DeHart, directed by Carl Schmel, and produced by Hannah Judy. The original On the Isle period ran from 1947 to 1963. In 1946, the casino hired Jerome Cargill to gather and organize local talent and energy into a first-class revue. The first one was an enormous success and set the template for many years to come. In 1973, after a 9-year gap without a show, John Lathrop brought theater back with a production of Bye Bye Birdie. The current On the Isle group began in 1999 with the casino presenting the musical revue On the Isle, produced by Sandy Whitehead and directed by Carl Schmel to celebrate its 100th anniversary. Since then, On the Isle has presented a show almost every year, continuing a casino tradition of originality and inclusive fun. In summary, the casino was formed and sustained by theater and shared performances of all sorts. In turn, it has spawned some of the nation's theater, much of the island's theater, and many individual careers. And it continues to do so. Viva il Casino!
Thank you so much, Pete. And Kate, you're up next.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Sorry. The casino has always been a place of whimsy, social interaction, and conviviality. And if we think the casino is humming today, our comings and goings don't hold a patch on the varied multitude of activities and entertainments open to the public or members held here over the years. And that's on top of the tennis and the theater. Beginning with the Virginia Reel at its opening fete in 1900, dances, often several times a week, have always been part of the casino's history. They were the place to go on the island. And even in the early days, an hour or so was reserved for the young to spruce themselves up and take the floor, though they were forbidden to do the bear hug or the grizzly bear. The orchestras, then as now, were top quality, and grape punch, unfermented, was offered throughout the evening. But even in the early 20s, the dance committee was concerned that the casino affairs were getting too fancy, and a series of Monday night shirtwaist or casual dances was introduced. The feeling being, quote, "It is the desire of old Sconseters to keep old Sconset conditions as far as possible," unquote. In the summer of 1925, there was a Charleston contest at each dance, complete with a cash prize. Notably, in the 20s and 30s, the first and last dances of the season were open to the public. Successive generations danced the frug, the monkey, and of course, the twist. Elaborate decoration of the hall continues to be an important part of the affair to this day, led by a devoted social committee. As the decades progressed, dances were held less frequently, just weekly in the 40s, bi-weekly in the 50s, and monthly in the 60s, until our annual event now. Dinner, potluck at first, was introduced in 1960. Volunteer cooks, probably many of you in the audience, were assigned chicken tetrazzini with varying degrees of success. No wonder it's catered now. The dance contests have been replaced by vigorous competition in costume and ingenuity in table design. Of course, the early masquerades in the 30s were also dances, themed costume parties with participants going as far as to rent attire, in one case, chiffon dresses with ostrich feathers and blue wigs, from New York. There were the Neptune Ball in 1935, the Black and Gold Ball in 1936, and the Advertising Ball in 1937, to name a few. Prizes were awarded, and spectators enjoyed the festivities from the balcony. These gala adult evenings faded out in the 50s, though the 1950 Nantucket Anthem Ball saw the hall festooned in gold chains and hung with 18 huge photographs of the island and Sankaty Light, all donated by Life magazine. Eventually, the masquerades became children's parties. Newspaper, chicken wire, fabric, paper mache, and paint, wit, creativity, and hours of dedication and construction went into the preparations for the procession up the center of the casino aisle at these family evenings. Results ranged from the year when a team emerged from a Japanese beetle trap as John, Paul, George, and Ringo, to the 1968 Block family concoction of an ink and M front page carrying the headline, "The Year 2000," with articles about what the children of the village would be doing at the opening of the 21st century. In addition to dances, masquerades, and movies, the casino has been home to all sorts of diversions and frolics over the years, and we can't begin to do them all justice here. In 1901, a lively and crowded party, complete with candy pulls and potato sack races, started a long tradition of festivities. Fairs, carefully planned day-long events, were held in the mid-20s. They featured various booths, a cake table piled with delicious confections, a rummage auction, the forerunner of the now defunct rummage sale, fortune-telling, and art shows. There were recitals and treasure hunts with clues in rhyme. Through the decades, speakers gave periodic lecture series on topics ranging from whaling to women's suffrage to, in 1912, Dr. Penrose delivering an address on the necessity of keeping a sanitary outlook. There were pool tables, ping pong, a bowling alley, as we've heard, and for a time, shuffleboard on the west porch. Many of these activities continued into the 40s despite World War II. Then whist, dominoes, bridge, and all manner of table games occupied community members. Parties and events for children have also been constants at the casino. As mentioned, many of these were held as benefits to support the casino in times of financial need. And then there were the pet shows, originally open to the public, which became so popular that in the 1950s they had to be limited to casino members and their animals. A variety of prizes, we like prizes at the casino, were awarded. At the 1960 pet show, a dachshund appeared disguised as Sconset hydrangeas. By the 60s and 70s, much had changed in Sconset, and the casino's pull as a social and community center had dissipated. Yes, right, we were the Cardinal C. Sorry. Dissipated. Fortunately, recent decades have seen a revival. And in addition to eagerly attended mixers and decktails, we have bingo several times this summer. Yep. And inspired by Jenny Price, we have an annual trivia night potluck coming up this week, complete with a lighthouse trophy for the winning table. Some don't think it's trivial and take their Sconset knowledge so seriously that anti-cheating measures were introduced. Fortunately, Jenny and Bonnie Block-Levison continue as co-producers to remind us of local lore and youthful follies. And of course, thanks to Paul Judy, we have Sconset History Night.
Thank you, Kate. I want to add one little tidbit to Kate's wonderful summary of social activities at the casino. After the dances of the 30s and 40s, there were often teapot parties. Earl Blount, the local policeman, Monk Cahoon, Speed Jewett, and Madaket Millie, who worked at the dances in various capacities, had a large teapot hidden behind the stage, into which they poured the dregs of any discarded glasses they came upon during the party. When the party was over and the building was emptied, the four of them would have their own party of mixed blessings. Now let's turn to tennis. Frank?
You know, I shouldn't really be doing this. My wife should be doing it. She spends about 35 hours a week playing tennis here. I haven't played tennis here in 3 years, and when I did, let's say there were 300 active members playing tennis. If they had ranked them all, I would have ranked about 273rd. But as it is, I lucked out because I have a good friend who's really very connected to the world of tennis, and I called him and he said he'd fly over and meet with me here and take a look at the casino and help me set a theme for the presentation. So I called him and hit the slide. Yeah. No. Next one. Yeah. Yeah. So at first he was pretty annoyed that we were meeting on red clay. You know, he lost a lot of French Opens to Nadal. And on the other hand, when he looked around at the casino, the club, the quaintness of it, the scale of it reminded him of Wimbledon. And he felt much better. So we started to talk about tennis, and he said that, you know, in the 20, 25 years of his career, the game had changed in some ways. You know, the clothes got weirder, the surfaces changed, the racket design changed. But when all was said and done, the game was still pretty much the same game. You were playing against somebody and trying to beat the person, and the rules hadn't changed. So I decided that that would really be the theme of this presentation about tennis at the casino, that the more things changed, the more they've stayed the same at the casino. You know, there's still, I mean, there are, not all the courts are red clay, but the casino is famous for its red clay courts. Players still wear all whites, and that isn't so true in very many places. Membership requires Sconset residents, and the casino is still the centerpiece of the village. Lots of things happen here, and you've heard about, the previous speakers talk so much about how many of the social events and cultural events have occurred over the last century at the casino in Sconset. Next slide. So this shows some of the changes, and they've been talked about in the design of the building. But as I said, the more things changed, really they do stay the same. Next slide. Well, the fashions have changed. But if you look at some of the stuff the pros are wearing now, I'm not sure that they're really better designed than this. Next slide. When you look at the history of this club, what's interesting is that in its first 50 years, there was no club pro. So the first pro was hired in 1949, which happens to be the year I was born. The next, and he stayed for 9 years, and Hugh Curry and his wife came in. They were here for a long time. Bob Bender followed them. Scott Zumwalt stayed here for 30 years, Keith Perrin for 12 years, Scott Harrington's been here for 14 years. So if you think about that, in the 3/4 of a century, there have only been 6 pros here. So, like I said, the more things change, the more they still kind of stay the same. There's a kind of stability here that's almost unbelievable. Next slide, please. In addition to the pros that have taught here, played here, just an interesting fact, on a typical summer day, the pros give about 30 lessons. And 3 of the pros are ranked in the world top 1,000, which, you know, if you're always thinking about who's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there are 8 billion people in the world. So if you're in the top 1,000, you're pretty damn good at tennis. So the leaders, these 2 guys that were here, Bill Tilden and I'm forgetting the other name now. But anyway, they're both world champions. Both had won more than 5 major tournaments during their careers. So the club has attracted some talent from the outside world too. Things have changed, but they've stayed the same. Most of the courts have been added. Most of them are still red clay. 4 of them are hard true. Next slide. Now we're going to have some crowd participation here. You've heard a lot of other people talk. Now some of you will all of you will get a chance to vote. So, and this game is called Truth or Consequences. It's the next slide, please. Which club allowed yellow tennis balls first? First. Wimbledon or the casino? Well, the casino brought yellow balls in first. I mean, of all the places that don't change, Wimbledon changes the least of all. So they were 2 years behind the casino before they brought yellow balls in. The reason the balls became yellow instead of white is colored television. The white balls didn't show up so well, so the balls became yellow instead. Where does the clay come from? No, I assume there was some pit somewhere where they dig up clay. Does anyone know where it really comes from? Yes? Yes, you are right. You are right. It is made from crushed brick, not natural clay. Next slide. There's a story that a couple was married on court 4, true or false? False. It's good. It's a good story. Someone could still do it. Next slide, please. Now, I've been told that this is true. I can't confirm it, but you heard the crowd here say it is true, so we will assume it is. There are 3. There are 3? There are 3 different sets of ashes spread around the courts. Really? Yes. Okay. That's a secret. Okay. Okay, there was a snack bar. Dave told me there never was a snack bar here, but there are people on my other speakers here who said there was a snack bar here for about 5 years, and it's now gone. So the question becomes, when it left, false? You don't believe that? It's false. Yes, 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 yes. So there's one, I think one more question here. Can you rent a tennis racket at the casino? Well, not exactly. I mean, you could demo a racket, and they'll, of course, lend you one. But if you went back in time, hit the next. You would hope that the player before you wore socks, but you could rent the shoes for 25 cents. Just like at the bowling alley. Next slide. Yeah, thank you very much.
Good job, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Our next story stream concerns the interactions between the casino and all inhabitants of Sconset. The casino was founded as a community center and open to all for its first 25 years. For a quarter century, the price of a season ticket plus a tennis fee for those who wanted to play was the only requirement for admission. That changed in 1924, when for the first time, there were qualifications for membership. Board minutes for July 4th of that year stated, "The character of the casino has now changed. and it is more in the nature of a club. In August 1924, the board decided that no one could join as a new member until his name was passed by the executive committee. In 1927, a membership committee was formed, and there was talk of becoming a closed club. Although simultaneously and ironically, there was a door-to-door canvassing for members, presumably those who passed muster. The board discussed permanent membership in 1928, and for the first time voted that all current members would automatically be eligible for membership the next year. In 1929, the board ordered that the gates on Main and Chapel Streets be locked to prevent non-members from intruding on the grounds, and that members-only signs be made and placed at these entrances. Despite mandating exclusivity, membership drives were held on and off throughout the 30s. The tension between the casino's current private club status and its founding as an open-to-all community center continues to resonate. Joan Brown Porter, who is still with us living year-round on the North Bluff, and whose family first came to Sconset in 1886, prior to the founding of the casino, is quoted in Nancy Newhouse's Voices of the Village, 2003, as follows. When we were teenagers growing up, the casino was the community center and it was open to everybody. All the dances for kids and adults were open. If the Islanders wanted to go, they could. Now, the casino is only for members. I find that sad. It isn't supposed to be that. When I got older and did the children's masquerades, I loved that, and it was for any child. Rob Benchley, however, also remembers that during masquerades, all the help for the Sconset families sat in the balcony to watch their charges. I want to mention at this point the existence of a building called Scott's Hall. The NHA reports that Frank Scott and his wife, Mary Chapman Scott, moved to Nantucket, and specifically to the racially mixed Codfish Park in 1917. At that time, Nantucket's black residents were largely domestic workers who came to the island with wealthy, white, seasonal families, the families they worked for. Noting the lack of a community center or hall of amusements for black Sconseters, and indeed black Nantucketers, the Scotts built a barn where weekly dances were held during the 1930s and 1940s. Definitely a topic for a future Sconset History Night, Scott's Hall still exists today as a maintenance building owned and used by Sankaty Head Golf Club. Scott's Dance Hall essentially served as the casino for the black residents of our village. The issue of race was probably not limited to separate dances. Before the Inky archives went dark, I had found and printed out a letter sent by the casino board of directors to the Enquirer and Mirror in September of 1960, the same year the Dachshund was covered in hydrangeas. That letter responded to a letter sent by Barbara King of Codfish Park. The crux of the matter was that Barbara King's daughter was given an application to the casino pet show, but when the applications were carefully compared against the membership list, the daughter's application was refused, as were all of those mistakenly given to non-member children. Of course, the Kings were black, and Mrs. King gently wondered if race figured in that decision. White year-round Sconseters were disenfranchised from using the casino to a great extent. The oral histories in Voices of the Village are full of references to local Sconset kids' inability to use the casino, at least officially. In his recorded 2003 interview, Oscar Bunting said of his childhood, "In the summer, we could always see the summer kids, and they always had bikes and nice clothes, and they could play tennis and go in the casino and play ping pong and badminton. We could never do that because we never had any money. We couldn't belong to it." Oscar goes on to say that he and his friends used to sneak in and play ping pong until the manager, Mr. Lou DeBarros, shooed them out. Vic Reed Jr. remembered, "We were not members, but we always got in there. No one heard us. The whole top of the casino ceiling is like a lattice work, and a lot of times we'd get up above the lattice and crawl around up there and tease the people that were down below. I can remember De Barros. He ran the place for years, and we used to run him ragged. Vic also remembered watching the tennis tournaments through the wire fence. Charlie Cahoon, who grew up sleeping in an unheated bedroom in Sconset, remembered, we didn't have blankets. We had old overcoats. We'd buy them in the rummage sale. That was a big deal. That's where I got all my great clothes. And certainly lots of us in this room could say the same, and we still mourn the demise of our beloved and historically entrenched rummage sale. Iski Santos had this to say about his Sconset childhood. We did go to the movies occasionally, but most of the time we didn't have any money, and we lay on the casino roof up there and looked through the windows, so there must have been some clear glass at some point. Skinner Coffin told me a few weeks ago that Mr. De Barros would let 5 or 6 of the local kids who were working at the Chanticleer come in and watch the movies for free after they got off their shifts. All the references to Lou De Barros, who was manager for 35 years, underline the importance of casino managers to the local populace year-round and seasonal. Certainly, I have very fond memories of Marsh Chambers, who served ably and genially with a twinkle in his eye for 30 years, 1963 to 1993. Marsh let my sister and me hit balls when we were teenagers before my family joined as members, and we played in cut-off blue jean shorts. Things were a lot more casual in the 70s. Ginny, Marsh's widow, is here with us tonight, and she is going to stand up and show us her beautiful casino sweater. And most of you also know Marsh Jr., who lives in the village. Marsh Chambers was succeeded by John Knight, who ably and charmingly served for a decade, from 1994 to 2004. And, you know, it'd be lovely to have some recollections from John. Wait, is he here? John. Thanks for being with us.
I'd like to, if we could just take a moment to thank all the people who've put in so much time, clearly, to prepare this information. Thank you. So I was manager 94 to 2004. I currently live in Rhode Island, and I've been to the Buttonwoods Casino. It's a few years older than this one. It has 2 active bowling lanes to the side of the main room. And there's a metal fence in the back known as like the candy hutch or something. Like all the candy that they sell to the kids on movie nights is all behind a locked metal fence. So similar to the snack bar, I guess. Frank, my only addition would be one morning I got a phone call at 7:45. I had just opened the casino. I picked up the phone in my groggy voice, and a woman on the line said, "I'd like a quart at 8 o'clock." And I said, "Well, you can't have a quart at 8 o'clock. You're not a member." And she said, "My husband will be so disappointed." Boom. 5 minutes later, a member called back, "John, can I please have a quart at 8 o'clock?" "Sure, happy to get you a quart. My renter, Yvonne Lendl, and his family really want to come over and play tennis." I say, "No problem. We'll set him up on court 1. It'll be just fine." So Yvonne and the 4 daughters and the wife, Samantha, walked in the front door at 8 o'clock, and Yvonne had blue shorts on. So my first introduction to Yvonne Lendl was ushering him to the pro shop, handing him a pair of extra large white shorts, ushering him to court 1. He taught his daughters a lesson for an hour. They picked up the balls, And then Yvonne grabbed the brush to sweep the court. And I rushed out and I said, Mr. Lendl, you don't have to do that. We pay kids $4 an hour to come at lunchtime to do it. And he said, no, I want my daughters to know that you have to return a court to the way you found it. And I've always appreciated that about him. So many great people have been here. I worked a wedding, Tom Brady and Giselle Monahan, Bridget Monahan, his girlfriend at the time, were at the kids' table, happy the whole time. Ray Bork walked over to the Chanticleer, and Marsh Jr. and I stalked him and his wife. And then eventually asked them, like, hey, what are you guys doing in town? And they said, well, it's our wedding anniversary. It was like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to crash your wedding anniversary. Lots of great people have helped this institution thrive. We've had movie premieres here. I know Serene Dillman's showing her movie here on Friday night. You should definitely come see it. And lots of great people in the town. Peter Fredland helping us run the movies and maintain the courts. Bruce Watts with the fire chief and keeping the building from burning down. Jerry Eldridge driving the truck, the fire truck. Jim, the postman. My two apologies to the community. When NERDA first started the buses, we hadn't quite synced the 4th of July bike parade and the schedule of the NERDA buses. So as I launched the parade from in front of the casino, I didn't realize there was a 20-year-old behind the wheel of the NERDA bus that was going to be stuck there for probably 30 minutes because he would have killed hundreds of kids if he had tried to move. So I appreciate everything that happens here, and everybody brings their talents to the table to make it happen, and I was grateful to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, John. It's a treat to see you again. Mike Coleman was our next manager from 2005 to 2021, and I am happy to report that when I asked Dave Dunn for the dates of managers since Marsh, he listed his tenure as 2021 to forever. Excellent news, Dave. So let's express appreciation to the current casino management and board for reviving the Community Center Foundation function of the casino, despite the club now being private. Bingo nights, Nan puppet performances, kids crafts, and even afternoon children's tennis clinics. Indeed, all children's programming is now open to the public, which is great. This beautiful facility is also open to the public for free events ranging from the recent Garden Club Flower Show and the annual Curtis Institute of Music concerts to the annual Sconset Christmas Party, which is delightful, albeit cold. Mary Groden's yoga classes continued their long tenure on the East Deck, open to all. July and August movies continue. This hall of amusements is rented for parties and weddings, film festivals, etc. The casino graciously lends the hall for Sconset Civic Association meetings, the Sconset Trust annual meeting, and on-the-aisle shows. Finally, the casino has been an employer of many in this room, multi-generationally. If you have worked at or for the casino ever, would you mind standing up? I'd be curious to see how many of you have worked here ever. Yes. Thank you. So the casino got off to a rocky start and had some years when its continuance looked dubious. But here it is, 125 years later, continuing to grow and evolve, lovingly maintained and dearly loved as the community center of Sconset. Thank you so much for coming this evening, and see you next year. Next year when our cup will runneth over, with Rob Benchley's centennial history of the Sconset Water Department.